All right, good afternoon, Rotarians and guests. This is the Rotary Club of Toronto. I'm John Fortney, the club president. And this is National Volunteer Week. As a charitable organization, two charitable organizations, we are successful because of our Rotary members, Rotaract, and their family and friends, our volunteers. Without you, we would not be able to do all the terrific work that we've been involved in with during these very difficult times and throughout the years. I cannot say enough about you, our incredible Rotary family volunteers. Your incredible skills, patience, kindness, drive, time, commitment, and passion. How you give back to the community, locally and globally. It makes me very proud to be part of this great volunteer team. Thank you, everyone. After the invocation and the recognition of traditional lands, please stay tuned for the national anthem and the loyal toast. You may stand if you wish. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of many Indigenous peoples who have walked and cared for this land for 15,000 years. They include the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, and the Treaty peoples of the Mississaugas of the Credit. As we try to make sense of war and strife, violence and poverty that continues to be felt by so many in our world, let us ask for wisdom. As we strive to bring unity and peace to a world embroiled in conflict, we ask for leadership and justice. As our leaders work to bring harmony to our country and the world, we urge them to remember Rotary's cornerstones of truth, fairness, goodwill, and lasting friendships. And for our great country and the bounty before us, let us be truly thankful. The national anthem. Ladies and gentlemen, the Queen. It is now my pleasure to introduce our head table. I am pleased to have the following people with me today. Naomi Wong, Rotarian since 2020, one of our COVID inductees, classification, event management. She is an event manager with Ensemble IQ, a member of our international and community services committees, and our Let's Be Personal speaker for today. Vegan Gazarian, a Rotarian since 2019, classification, IT consulting services. He is project manager, NetSuite Consulting with ERP Buddies Inc., a member of our foundation board and is a host to our guest speaker, who is Raffi Sarkissian, who will be more formally introduced shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, our head table. For our virtual meetings, we do not have an official monitor to introduce visiting Rotarians and guests. I don't off bat see any. I know we have a couple of new potential members. Mark, welcome. For our visiting Rotarians, I want to thank you for choosing our club for your makeup. We hope that you enjoyed the meeting today. To our guests, welcome to our virtual meeting. Please feel free to contact the office and find out how you may be able to make a difference by joining us. Rotarians and guests, please welcome our visitors in our tradition of our great club. Again, as you already know, and in case you don't, you should be aware that at these virtual Rotary meetings, that if you have your video camera on, you may show up on YouTube or Google Meet recordings or live streaming. We ask that when you have your camera on, that you present a professional image, have your lunch earlier, please, and we are aware of what is going on in the background when the camera is on. If you do not want to appear, please turn off your video. We will not be able to edit you out later. Thank you. Lori Brazier is up next with a short announcement regarding a direct related event, and then she will share a diversity message with you as well. Lori?
Thank you, President John. As you may have seen from advertising and on the slides earlier, our District 7070 conference is coming up at the end of June on Saturday. Everything starts on Saturday, June 26th, and all clubs in the district have been invited to put together a community service project. And we have submitted a project to go into Coronation Park and Trillium Park, which are down on the Lakeshore West. Coronation Park is at the bottom of Strawn Avenue, and Trillium Park is the area around Ontario Place. We're going to go in, we're going to pick up garbage, all socially distanced in small groups of 5, wearing masks and gloves, so all very safe. And we need a minimum of 10 Rotarians to sign up for the district conference and participate in the morning's events, which I'm sure will be very interesting, inspiring, maybe give us some great ideas for things that we can do as the pandemic hopefully soon begins to ease off and we can get back out into the community and do things. So please look through your email. You should have a Club Runner email from me. I've had a few people sign up. Again, we need a minimum of 10 to join, and you just need to join in the Zoom meetings for the district in the morning, and then at 1 p.m. we'll be out in the parks to pick up garbage. So hope to see a few of you signing up, and if you can't find the email, reach out to me directly. Now for diversity and inclusion statements. So from myself, to begin, I am proud of the initiative taken by the Rotary Club of Toronto to address racism. We cannot change the past, but we can change how we conduct ourselves today and shape a future free of systemic bias and injustice. For those like myself who are of European descent, the first step is to listen and to understand the perspectives of those from other cultures. And I very much welcome the discussions. And I'm now going to read a statement from Nestle Eugene. Nestle couldn't be here with us today. I will read her statement. We are entering an era where there is heightened awareness around race and the need for diversity and inclusion due to a series of recent events in US and Canada. I'm so excited that the Rotary Club of Toronto has taken on the task to become part of the movement, as everyone deserves the right to visibility and respect, regardless of their race, gender, sexuality, or creed. Thank you, Nestle, for that statement, and back over to you, President John.
Thank you so much, Lori and Nestle. Powerful statements. Thank you. Now it's time for our Let's Be Personal speaker, and it's my pleasure to pass over the agenda to Naomi. Naomi, over to you.
Thank you so much, President John. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Naomi Anderson-Wong, and I'm honored to be a Rotarian. I live at Yonge and Lawrence, currently with my husband and son, Sebastian. Rotary has always been a part of my life, living overseas, as my father in the diplomatic corps was a Rotarian in my birthplace, Japan, then Quebec, Hong Kong, Philippines, London, then Ottawa. I graduated from Marymount International School in London with an international baccalaureate and then went on to Queen's University. I have worked in events for over 15 years in both French and English, with some of my favorites being Louis Vuitton Time Capsule, medical conferences, and the Rotary Conference, of which I was an ambassador at the Hamburg booth. I have been working with Ensemble IQ, and during the pandemic have produced over 60 virtual events, meetings, educational sessions with up to 500 booths as virtual engagement specialists. I am also a speaker recruiter for our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I actively volunteer with Thorncliffe Canadian Community Services Organization, where my son tutors French. I am also with the Asian Gold Ribbon Campaign Awareness and Anti-Asian Racism and the Dale Initiative. I'll leave you with a quote that resonates to me and to my feelings about Rotary. The greatness of a community is most actively measured by the compassionate actions of its members. From Corita Scott King. Over to you, President John.
Thank you, Naomi. Again, it's so wonderful to get to know everybody, especially our new members. So anyone who wants to get on the list, please call Dawn Bell, and we want to get to know you. And since none of us have got to meet Naomi in person yet, we're all dying to get to know her, and everybody else who's joined this year, please feel free to call Dawn, and we'd love to hear from you. Okay, now for our guest speaker introduction, Megan, over to you.
Thank you, President John. Dear Rotarians and guests, the word genocide was coined in 1944 by Raphael Lemkin, who was influenced by the systematic elimination of Armenians living in Turkey from their historic homeland of 3,000 years. The Armenian genocide took place a century ago, but the wounds it inflicted on survivors, their descendants, and generations of Armenians have never healed. We have a distinguished speaker today who will speak to us on the legacy of the Armenian genocide and Canada's response. It is with great honor that I welcome Raffi Sarkissian to our meeting today. Raffi is the founder, former chair, and current board member of Toronto's Sarah Corning Center for Genocide Education. He is the principal of the only full-day Armenian Canadian school in Ontario and is a much respected and a much loved leader of Toronto's Armenian community. Raffi has conducted extensive research in genocide and human rights education and has authored many articles and books on the importance of understanding, remembering, and teaching genocide. I thank the program committee and its chair, Bert Steenberg, for extending an invitation to Raffi to speak to our club on the eve of the Armenian Genocide Memorial Day. Over to you, Raffi.
Thank you so much, Vigen, and thank you for the Rotary Club of Toronto for providing me with this opportunity to speak to you today. And as Vigen mentioned, it is in fact the eve of the 106th anniversary of the Armenian Genocide, and during which time we commemorate around the world the destruction of the native Armenian population of what was then the Ottoman Empire. I'm going to be speaking to you about the legacy of the Armenian Genocide and Canada's response. And it's important to mention, with regards to the Armenian Genocide, took place between 1915 to 1923. As you can see on the map depicts the locations of the destruction of the Armenian Genocide. It was driven by the Committee of Union and Progress, which followed the ideology of Pan-Turkism. And under the guise of the First World War, the Committee of Union and Progress decided to carry out this Pan-Turkic ideology, which was basically to homogenize the population of the Ottoman Empire and extend the empire towards the east, to unite with what they identified as Turkic individuals or peoples of Turkic lineage. So the Assyrian, Greek, Armenian populations of the Ottoman Empire had no place in that ideology. So in particular, although the Assyrians and the Greeks also experienced genocide during this time, I'll be focusing on the experience of the Armenians. In the case of my own family history, I'd like to also mention that I'm a descendant of survivors of the Armenian genocide on both paternally and maternally. And my families were from the location that you see on the map here. What's interesting is, and something that hasn't been spoken to about often, and I think there's more and more education about this now in our school system, thanks to especially the Toronto District School Board's work in promoting genocide education, is Canada's involvement, positive involvement during that time. So Canada and Canadians have been involved with the Armenians of the Ottoman Empire since 1880. So that's well before the Armenian genocide. The precursor of the Armenian genocide was also the Hamidian massacres, which took place by Sultan Abdul Hamid, which was between 1894 to 1896, which caused the murder of over 300,000 Armenians of the Ottoman Empire, creating much vulnerability to the Armenian communities in that empire, set the tone for the Committee of Union Progress, which came into power later on, who had much more of a destructive policy of now eliminating the existence of Armenians from their native homeland. Two individuals to really identify here as Canadians who were present at that time. The first is, you can see here, Catherine Bell Fraser. She was at the age of 24, actually, from Nova Scotia, against the will of her brother and father, joined a group to go to the Ottoman Empire and traveling at that time was quite difficult, and went actually to the interior of the Ottoman Empire in the city of Van, and was basically a school teacher for Armenian children in that city. And she was there in 1892. And about 2 years later was when the Hamidian massacre started. And during that time, she witnessed the massacre of 40,000 Armenians, local Armenians. And she escaped to what is today Iran, and later on to Bulgaria, worked as an interpreter for Armenians who had escaped from the slaughter. Later on, dedicated her whole life going throughout cities in the United States, raising money for Armenian victims of the Hamidian massacres, and later on the Armenian genocide as well. The second photo that you see is a photo of Sarah Corning, which is the namesake of the organization I had founded. And she was a Canadian from Nova Scotia, once again, who is most known for saving thousands of Greek and Armenian orphans from the city of Smyrna in 1922, when the Turkish troops had started to burn down the city. It was a city where a lot of Greeks and Armenians had sought refuge during the Armenian genocide. And she went actually into the burning city, knew that there's Armenian orphans and Greek orphans that were in those orphanages, and actually was able to find room on American battleships to take them to Greece, where she cared for them in an orphanage she founded there. But the experience that the Canadians had with the Armenians there established a strong sense of global humanitarian involvement in the country. I could say that Canada's humanitarian roots were actually set during this time. And it was thanks to a lot of the missionaries that were there who risked their lives for the Armenians. A few other examples of Canadian aid as well. One that's noteworthy is also that $30,000 was collected by Canadians in 1896. This was after the Hamidian massacres. And this fundraising effort was actually led by Queen's University Principal George Monroe Grant. If you were to visit Queen's University, you would actually see a plaque in his memory there commemorating his work for the Armenians. And between 1918 to 1920, We also saw Canadian Sunday school children who were affected by the reports that were coming in from the missionaries and the nurses and the teachers who were working in those areas, in actually raising money by holding specific events, and actually raised about $300,000, which is near $5 million today. As many fundraising efforts were sparking throughout the country in Canada, in 1917, we saw the foundation of the Armenian Relief Association of Canada, which was created under the patronage of Governor General Julian Byng. This was to create better coordination and to increase the effective fundraising efforts. So we saw throughout Canada Armenian Sundays, where Canadian churches held Armenian Sundays, where children would give up their sweets and sometimes their meals, and they would donate the amounts that they would save from those to the starving Armenians, as they were called at that time. One other exemplary event that we see, which was a first in actually North America, which was a newspaper outlet using its strengths to raise money for a humanitarian cause. So on January 9th, 1920, we see the Globe launching its most remarkable campaign, the Call from Armenia, which amassed about $300,000 of that time. And they had daily coverage of the Armenian genocide that was presented in the news. And they listed daily all the donors' names. According to reports at that time, in total, after 1916, about $16 million was raised, of equivalents of $60 million of today. So we saw what's significant is it wasn't just several philanthropists, but rather people from all walks of life were donating money. This particular photo shows a handwritten letter from a child explaining as to why they're donating their money. They broke open their piggy bank and donated whatever money that there was in there. And as you can see here, that different types of people from individuals who were scrubbing floors, from individuals who were working for the Canadian Pacific Railway, were donating all the funds that they could to support the Armenians who were victimized during the genocide. Along with this, we see with the religious organizations and administrators of several universities who were heavily involved in the lobbying efforts, to have even more Canadian involvement in saving Armenian lives. So just not having fundraising, but rather ensuring the long-term viability of the Armenian nation. So there was a strong support for creating an independent Armenian nation on the Armenian homeland, which was now under the control of the Ottoman Empire. So that was something that's significant that appeared in a lot of the lobbying efforts. There was also a push for the Canadian mandate for independent Armenia in 1920. So after the First World War ended and different mandates were being set up, there was a very strong support for Canada to establish or take on the mandate to create an independent Armenia, which unfortunately fell through and the United States took over. And in actual government correspondence and parliament decisions, Canada opposed the return of any Armenian provinces to Turkish rule based on the experience that the Armenians had during the Armenian genocide. And one of the other strongest kind of signs of recognition and support for the Armenians was also the Canadian government's allocation of about $300,000 to Armenian Canadians for their personal and material losses in the Ottoman Empire. This money came from reparations Canada received from Germany after the First World War. But what continued to become a concern for Canadians at that time was the fate of survivors, particularly orphans. As people survived the death marches to the deserts and the concentration camps, thanks to the Near East relief efforts who had set up different orphanages in the peripheries of the Ottoman Empire, we continued to see those orphanages being attacked by the Ottoman Turkish troops. And there was an actual policy of assimilation, of forced assimilation, where there was a policy of anyone under the age of about 8 or 6 or 8 or 7 was considered to be assimilable, and children were actually stolen from families and sometimes from the deportation routes and placed into what they call Turkification centers. So in 1921, there were still over 70,000 Armenian children that were in these institutions. So Canadians actually, this photo is actually a photo of the nearest relief orphanage. In this one photo, you could see about 20,000 Armenian orphans, and it is in what is today Gyumri, Armenia. So the next kind of effort was to actually bring orphans to Canada. And this was actually a Canadian first, once again, in bringing in, providing assistance to non-British or non-Commonwealth refugees. It was quite the task to encourage the Canadian government to take this step, but it was successful. And between 1923 to 1927, we saw the Armenian Relief Association of Canada arranging about 109 Armenian orphans were brought to Georgetown, Ontario, and they were raised on a farm in what is today the Georgetown Cedar Vale Park and Cedar Vale Community Center. So in the pictures, you see the group of the first 40 boys that arrived. In this photo, you can see the building today. And Canadians raised about $100,000 in a year to care for the transportation and care of the children. The children were very well known for their voices, and they sang in different churches in Georgetown. And they themselves actually raised more funds by, again, holding Armenian Sundays, giving up their meals, selling fruits and vegetables that they were growing on the farm. And their hopes were to bring more boys to Canada. Unfortunately, when after especially the First World War and geopolitics, and later on with the formation of NATO and Turkey becoming a member of NATO, Canada had a long period of participating in the denial of the Armenian genocide by refusing to acknowledge it for what it was. And we saw, thankfully, decades of work in encouraging Canada to acknowledge its own history of saving lives and staying true to that, and begin to participate in commemoration and remembrance efforts and rectifying its position. And in 2002, we see the Canadian Senate recognizing the Armenian genocide, 2004, the House of Commons, 2006, the official recognition by the Canadian government took place. And thereafter, we see different types of initiatives being realized. In 2008, the Toronto District School Board created a curriculum on genocide education and included a unit on the Armenian genocide. And this actual course is actually taught by different school boards as well, and they have adopted in different schools. And in 2015, which was quite significant as well, the Canadian Parliament also identified April as Genocide Remembrance, Condemnation, and Prevention Month. What you see in the photo is a statue of Sarah Corning, which was placed in Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, with the efforts of the Sarah Corning Society. And it's placed in the Yarmouth County Museum and Archives. It was erected in 2019 in memory of Sarah Corning and her work. In this photo, you can see commemorative plaques. So if you were to visit the Cedar Vale Community Center today, you would see an Ontario Heritage Trust blue historic plaque. The building has also been established as a historic site and as a protected site. And you could see in the first photo the plaque that was unveiled announcing that. And under it is a placard with information about the Georgetown boys. So one of the things that is important to identify is why is it important to remember, and why is it important to pursue justice for the genocide? especially in particular to the Armenian case, which is, it happened 160 years ago. Many people would say that it's not important to continue to pursue justice. Unfortunately, due to the fact that the Turkish government today denies that a genocide has taken place, they've missed on an opportunity to transform Turkish society into accepting the minorities of the country, to learn from the horrors of the Armenian genocide, and to memorialize it, to remember it, to educate about it, because genocide is a crime that transcends time and space. It goes beyond 1915. It goes beyond the generation that actually physically experienced it. So the consequences we could see as transgenerational. So as something that happened to my grandparents, although my grandparents are not alive today, the consequences of the genocide, of the destruction of the memory, destruction of the spaces and places where Armenians lived, the destruction of personal property, religious sites, cultural heritage, the endangerment of language of the native population, which our school, our Armenian school in Toronto, which I'm the principal of, is a safeguard of Western Armenian, is all under threat because of that mass destruction of the genocide and today's denial of it. And unfortunately, today what we see is the byproducts of that, or the continuation of the Armenian genocide today, because Pan-Turkism is unfortunately alive and well. Having not addressed that past, we've allowed Turkey, together with Azerbaijan, to continue on with that Pan-Turkism ideology. And just in September 27, 2020, we see the start of a 44-day war where Turkey and Azerbaijan, and together with jihadist recruits from Syria, embarked on a 44-day campaign of further destroying parts of the Armenian homeland, at this time in the Republic of Artsakh. And this led to about the displacement of 600,000 Armenian locals, the destruction of personal property, religious sites. You can see in the photo that's the Church of the Holy Savior in Shushi, which was destroyed during the war in a targeted attack. And it was later on defaced when the Azerbaijani military entered that territory, now occupies it. And this is unfortunately due to decades of hate being propagated within the country by the leadership and the state-sponsored destruction of Armenian historical and religious presence in that territory. And what's problematic is the war has ended, the destruction has taken place, but now Ilham Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, has actually opened up a trophy museum, a park, where you could see a photo of him at the bottom corner. He's walking through a hallway of helmets of young Armenian soldiers who were just killed a few months ago. And he had commissioned to make mannequins, which you can see a picture of at the top, that have racist depictions of Armenian soldiers that riddle the park, where unfortunately even Azerbaijani children are encouraged to attend and to play with. There's already pictures of this sort and videos that are already surfacing on social media, where Azerbaijanis are attending this park and actually slapping and abusing these mannequins, the creators of which actually were quoted saying, "We tried our best. We're not used to creating ugly things, but we tried our best to create the ugliest versions of these mannequins as possible." So when sites of this sort are opening up, while sites of memory are being destroyed, it's problematic, where the sites where the genocide took place, now occupied by Turkey, which should have become the equivalent of the concentration camps after the Second World War, where we remember and we are educated by these sites. These sites became sites which were hidden, which were destroyed. This one particular site you see is Der Zor, which is the concentration camps of Armenians in the desert. And here you could see that there's mounds where you could still brush the soil and find Armenian bones even 100 years later. This site was actually targeted by ISIS This is located in Syria, and Turkish-backed jihadists actually destroyed the site along with its archives and the bones that it kept in the museum for all those individuals who didn't have a proper burial. This is the before and after of the church that is in that location. So I know that we've had quite a while. I'd like to open up for some questions at this time. So back to you, President John.
Thank you, Raffi. I haven't got many questions yet, but I think I may get some. Having grown up during high school years living in Georgetown, I didn't know about the Georgetown boys. And last year on Facebook, on the Georgetown page, there were some photos. There had been a reunion of the Georgetown boys and their families. They've all kept in touch, of course, and that's where I learned about it. I had no idea. And it was I had no idea how impactful it was. It's made me very proud to be from Georgetown and Canadian, of course. You know, when we talk about genocide and it's funny. This isn't the first one, and this unfortunately wasn't the last one. And you know, the world's not learning, and we're still performing genocide, which I think just for the world in general, just knowing about these genocides and knowing that they have happened is important to try and stop them from happening again, as well as paying homage to those that were displaced and killed. How many Armenians are in Canada now? Do you know? Mark, Raffi?
I'm not sure of an exact number, but the cities where Armenians are concentrated in are particularly in Toronto, Montreal, Southern Ontario, and Vancouver. But the largest populations are in Toronto and Montreal today. But every one of these cities have community centers, churches that are in operation. And you could see that happening throughout the world with all the diasporan communities of the Armenians who have basically found this as a way to survive outside of their native homeland, having to recreate their communities, and then also preserving their identities through cultural organizations, schools, churches, and so on.
How big is your school?
So our school is a population of close to 640 students. That's a nursery to grade 12 school. So it serves the families of the Greater Toronto area. It is the only day school that teaches the Western Armenian language, which is the language spoken by the Armenians who experienced the genocide. And there is other day schools as well in Montreal. So the highly populated areas have those day schools. So now we're about 42 years in operation.
Wow, that's excellent. I mean, heritage is just so important, and language. Someone's asked, did the U.S. administration announce a policy change? I'm not sure what that's referring to.
Yes, so it seems as though, not to get our hopes up, but the United States could be making a historical decision through Biden tomorrow in acknowledging the Armenian genocide after years of denial. It's important to note that the United States, as well as Canada, had a very close relationship with the Armenians during that time in saving Armenians' lives. So again, there was a long period of denial due to geopolitics, which has extended even further for the United States. But we'll have to see what's going to happen tomorrow on the day of the Armenian genocide commemoration.
Question here, I don't know how to word this delicately. Part of the genocide, was it based on religion or nationality, or both?
Religion was used as a way to create a divide, but in no way was religion the prime motive. The motive was ethnicity. You could find in the Middle East, the Ottoman Empire, the peoples living in the peripheries, which then became Lebanon, Syria, and the Arabic countries. We had Muslim populations who were outcrying the Armenian genocide and calling on the safeguarding of the Armenians there. So this was by all means not a due to strictly Armenians being Christian, but rather being ethnically different.
I know for the Holocaust, I know in Ontario there's a great program where they're actually Holocaust survivors are actually, I guess they're ready before they pass. They want to talk about their experiences, and then their stories are being recorded for posterity. Is there anything like that for Armenian?
It's interesting because the Jewish community has often asked us about how do we continue to remember in absence of our survivors, because today there's very few who are still alive, and those who are alive were very young when the genocide happened. So a lot of the work that was done had to be done at a time when a lot of the technologies we have today weren't present. So a lot of recordings that we've salvaged of Armenian survivors, including those who came to Canada, were conducted quite well. But there was a lot of people, as in the case of many who experienced this trauma, who refused to talk about their experiences or did not provide the entirety of their stories because of be it that they lived it was shameful for them, or they did not want to relive those horrors. So there is a pain in trying to remember and retell those stories, which we saw in our grandparents as well. Some were able to brush the surface, and in some cases we found out more from our parents and not from them directly. And it's quite painful to remember those stories now. But it's unfortunate that now we have a generation, our students, right, in our school, for example, who will not have met a survivor. And it's the first generation now who will be raised learning about the genocide secondhand, and not by someone who is present, who experienced it. So this makes it even more difficult when there's denial, right? Just today, actually, it's troubling that this would happen, and it's something that we'll have to be addressing very soon. Is the Ottawa Citizen actually published an advertisement by a Turkish group denying the Armenian genocide, which is unheard of. I mean, how could there be a Canadian newspaper today? Imagine if they were to advertise or take on give advertising space to a Nazi group denying the Holocaust, for example. So this is something, and we're hoping it's an oversight, but we'd have to address it now because this is exactly what we have to do, is always justifying, is always trying to defend, especially since that denial is always there. So it's very important that as Canadians today, we have to ensure that we work to prohibit denial, because denial is today being used as hate speech. And by scholars, particularly Gregory Stanton, who has published the stages of genocide. The last stage is denial. So the last stage is the catalyst to now recreate that process, to regenerate that process, as we saw in September by Turkey and Azerbaijan, which evading justice, in the absence of justice and reparations and such, we see now an emboldened, new leaders carrying on that same crime, be it to Armenians or be it anywhere in the world. We saw Hitler actually commenting on the fact that Turkey got away with it. He encouraged his troops that, after all, who remembers the Armenians, right? Go ahead, and we're going to carry out this Holocaust against the Jews and the Polish, and we're going to succeed, and people are going to forget this just as they did the Armenians. And it's very scary to see how Hitler, and there's a whole book about Ataturk, which is the founder of modern day Turkey, and in the Nazi imagination, of how Nazis really were inspired by Ataturk, and how he was able to lift Turkey away from that memory of the genocide and evade being punished for it. And they were very obsessed with how that was done and how they could imitate it.
I've got a a more positive question here. I assume you probably have some great success stories of Armenians that were refugees that have done well here in Canada. Do you have any example of one you may want to highlight? Or
Yes, of course. There's Yusuf Karsh. He was a survivor of the Armenian genocide, who was a very famous Canadian photographer. He's photographed many of the most influential individuals at the time, and thankfully he's remembered with a statue that was erected in Ottawa recently as well. And there was a commemorative stamp that was published by the Canada Post as well recently. And he stands as one of the most influential Canadian Armenians as a survivor. There's descendants of survivors, right? There's Adam Ogoyan, who's a director, film director, world-renowned, and especially in Canada. There is the popular children's singer Raffi, whose father was also a very famous photographer, Kavuk, and Raffi was also a descendant of a survivor of the Armenian genocide. So there's definitely several who have made their mark in Canada, and many more to come of descendants of survivors who thanks to Canada and the peaceful existence in Canada and the opportunities that Canada creates, especially with both allowing minorities to practice their religions and teach their languages, and also then can also contribute to Canadian society in their individual ways.
and that's amazing. I knew there would be a few. Karsh, I mean, for his era, he was possibly the most famous photographer in the world. I mean,
Yeah.
his photographs are magnificent. We're probably going to get closing out on time here. I do want to mention, David Libby mentioned that our International Services Committee this year supported a project sponsored by the Rotary Club of Sydney Sunrise. We gave them $2,000 for the Martuni Maternity Ward through the Rotary Club of Yerevan in Armenia.
That's excellent.
And Mark mentions the Ottoman Empire was one of the most religiously diverse empires in Europe and Asia, housed many large groups of Christians and Jews. Why do you think the Committee of Union and Progress, question just disappeared, decided to pursue homogenization?
Well, it's interesting that the fact that there were religious minorities present in the Ottoman Empire didn't necessarily mean that those minorities were respected. There were different rules that applied for those minorities. They were, yes, allowed to practice their religion, but rather they had to pay, in different ways to have that opportunity. The Armenians, as the other religious minorities, were second-class citizens. Armenians had to pay 5 to 6 times more taxes than their neighbors. They had to participate in corvée labor, where males would have to leave for 2 years to work for free as through slave labor. They weren't protected under the legal framework of the Ottoman Empire either, so they were quite vulnerable. That led to many neighboring peoples to be able to rob them, to pillage, to murder without consequence. Under the legal system of the Ottoman Empire, whoever was not a Muslim was not considered to be truthful and equivalent to them. So it wasn't that it was a happy-go-lucky empire where everyone lived in peace. Rather, the Armenians, Greeks, Jews were all subjects. They weren't citizens. And the Armenians wanted to be citizens, just as all the other minorities. And the Committee of Union and Progress promised that, right? It was a revolution to bring down the Sultanate, to establish a constitutional monarchy, to create opportunities for the minorities, and everyone participated in that process of ending the Sultanate, which was very oppressive towards the Armenians, especially at that time in the 1800s. But the empire actually came into existence through great violence. the predecessors of the Ottoman Empire actually invaded the territory and destroyed and killed and subdued the population and made its mark in the native territories of the Greeks and the Armenians. It's quite haunting to go back to see the 800 years of Ottoman history and how it came about and where it ended up in. But the Community of Progress, right, under the guise of fraternity and equality, came into power. But in secrecy, they had planned that after coming into power, they would execute this ideology of pan-Turkism. And the First World War allowed for that opportunity. While the world was busy fighting their own wars, they would be able to address the Armenian question, as it was called, to destroy the Armenian population.
Okay, I think that's it for the questions. Thank you so much. Raffi, thank you. It's a very important story that needs to be told and retold and retold. And thank you. A donation has been made in your honor to Shelterbox Canada. Shelterbox is a cutting-edge disaster relief charity which hand delivers shelter and supplies to families affected by natural disasters and conflict. Their signature shelter boxes and shelter kits contain the tools needed to rebuild communities and transform lives. All aid is customized to meet the specific needs of the family so they can not only survive, but recover from disaster. Shelterbox teams will go to the ends of the earth to ensure that no family is left without shelter after disasters. Shelterbox is a Rotary International project partner. This donation has been made in partnership with the Rotary Club of Toronto's International Service Committee. Thank you again, Raffi. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much. It was an honor.
Next Friday, April the 30th, our guest speaker will be Oshawa Mayor Dan Carter. His topic will be Ordinary Actions, Extraordinary Impacts. I'm telling you guys, you have to come next Friday. He spoke at President's training last year. His story it will blow you away. He was addicted, homeless. Now he's mayor of a fairly large city, and his story, and he says it was he's just a great presenter. So I really, really, really recommend coming next Friday. You will not be disappointed. He's an amazing speaker and an amazing story. I'm closing. Part of our strategic plan, which is ending up this year, our current plan, and I think most of you know that one of the things was working together with other Rotary clubs, with businesses, just bringing in more people into the fold, and even our committees working closer together, and the foundation and the club. Well, it looks like the district's doing the same thing, and they've been doing a lot of really big projects that they want different clubs to join in, and Laurie alluded to the one for the district. I strongly recommend if anyone is able to join in Saturday morning, it's $10 to do the virtual. There'll be some great presenters. Get to know some of your local Rotarians in our district. And then in the afternoon, go do the work project with the Community Services Committee. It'll be an amazing day. They also asked us to buy a tent to set up a shelter box tent. Well, apparently in the president's backyard, but I don't have a backyard. So we as a club have decided to donate $1,200 towards shelter box, which was the cost of a tent. And so we're participating. It just won't be a party in my non-existent backyard. And same thing with the Great Lakes cleanup. Unfortunately, with COVID, we're not doing it, but this is not just a district-wide, but this is every district along the Great Lakes is participating, literally thousands of Rotarians and their family and friends cleaning up the watershed to the Great Lakes. So I think in future, we're going to see more and more participation amongst ourselves, bringing in more people maybe who aren't Rotarians, who want to help us, and maybe they'll see what we do, they'll join us. But I think it's really amazing to take a look at this opening up of less of the them and us mentality that we've seen for so many years. It's all us now. We're all working together. So I'm really thrilled, and I hope that everyone will join in with the Great Lakes cleanup, with the Laurie's program, with the Coronation Park. And on that note, I hear you guys have snow in the city. I had no snow up here. So I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And again, if you want to reach out to Laurie or any of us, we'll hook you up for the district conference June 26th, I believe. And with that, The meeting is adjourned. We'll see you all next week. Have a fantastic weekend.